Hey, this is Kahja Elliott, Bronx born and raised, ATL made, Bay Area becoming, and this is the As Told By podcast. All right, we're back with this week's episode of the As Told By podcast, and I am here in San Francisco recording today from the Tenderloin District. So I have a really interesting episode with one of my favorite organizations in the Bay. So let's get started. When you hear the names Reams, California, De La Creamery, Taranga, Besharam, Clandestina Cocina, Peaches Patties, Bouge Cali, Mini Bells. What do all these Bay Area food businesses have in common? They are all food businesses that are alumni of La Cocina, a San Francisco-based food business incubator program focused on providing affordable commercial kitchen spaces, industry-specific technical assistance, access to market opportunities, as well as providing resources to women from both immigrant communities and communities of color. And today I'm talking with Leticia Landa, Executive Director of La Cocina. Welcome to the As Told By podcast.
Thank you. I'm going to steal that intro. That was perfect.
That's the intros. There's so many folks I called off in there that I know personally, and certainly their food I know, and some that I don't know personally, but I do know their food. And wow, what an impact.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually am just coming here from having had lunch at Lunette's Friends and Family soft opening. And even though I've worked at the organization for 16 years, every time I go to a new space that's opened by somebody who's gone through our program, it gives me goosebumps. I mean, it really is just so spectacular to watch these talented women and how much their businesses have grown, like how many accolades they've gotten, how delicious the food is. I have the best job.
You have the best. You do have the best job. And so many of those people they're showing up at such a high level in the food ecosystem in the Bay Area. So y'all are leaving quite a footprint.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and jump in, though. So let's start with talking about the founding story of La Cocina. I understand that y'all started back in 2005. And if I heard right, you've been here since its inception?
Not quite. I started in 2008. But almost.
Okay, so early on.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about the founding story of how La Cocina came to be.
Yeah, so, La Cocina was really born out of the food ecosystem that existed in the Bay Area and that really exists everywhere, which is that often immigrant women, women of color, are cooks. They're just, they love cooking, they love feeding people. And when times get tough, when, families need a little extra money, selling food is a really good way to increase a family's income. And so, you see people selling food on street corners, from, BART stops sometimes, often from home. If you need a birthday cake and somebody's a really good baker, they'll make you a cake, you pay them for it. And all of that is basically like the informal food economy. So people who are cooking, but they don't have permits, licenses, kind of all of the trappings of like a formal food business. Mm-hmm. And so that existing ecosystem was really alive and well in the Mission District back in like the late 90s and early 2000s. And there were a number of organizations that were doing economic development work. So really, working to try to increase economic mobility and to provide folks with more access to opportunities, that were doing business planning and really trying to get people to see themselves as business owners. They did a study at some point and really realized that a lot of the people who were writing business plans or who had dreams of opening food businesses weren't ever taking that step to formalize. They were still cooking at home. They were still just selling kind of to friends or to people in their neighborhood. And they, the realization was that the biggest barrier at that time was that there was just not a lot of affordable kitchen space. And in order to pull the permits, in order to be an official caterer, you especially then, couldn't be selling out of your home. You couldn't use your home kitchen. Now, the rules have changed since then, but this is, the early 2000s. So those organizations came together. They realized there was a real need for a kitchen space in the Mission District that could serve all these different people that were cooking. And they actually went to the Women's Foundation of California. And the Women's Foundation of California found a location on Folsom Street, a very generous donation, that person built a kitchen basically to kind of start this organization. And so La Cocina means the kitchen, and it is a kitchen on on Folsom Street in the Mission neighborhood. And we Originally, the idea was that it was just going to be a community kitchen. So just like rented by the hour, people could go there, cook, and then, formally sell their products. But very quickly, the realization was made that it's not actually just about having access to a kitchen space. There's so many other things that are complicated about the food industry and that make it more complicated for people, especially women of color, immigrant women, people who, maybe English is their second language, to just navigate how complicated all the permitting is and all the requirements for food. So then La Cocina really quickly shifted from being a community kitchen to being an incubator space. So an incubator meaning that it was going to be providing services and a kitchen. So really expertise around getting a food business started. Mm-hmm. And that's how the organization started. Actually, when I first started in 2008, I was officially an employee of the Women's Foundation of California because La Cocina hadn't yet become like an independent entity, but we did shortly thereafter. And since then, we've really been dedicated to doing the same thing, which is to making this kitchen space available at an affordable cost and to working with really talented entrepreneurs who have incredible products and who are already selling them for the most part. They know what they're doing. They were popping up. They're selling out of their car. They're selling out of their house, and then providing them with a space and then a lot of different resources and, kind of like the foundations of a formal business, all the permits, licenses, finances, all the operational stuff, totally. All the things that cooks often find slightly less exciting than cooking. But, if you want to be a business owner, you've got to do all the things. You've got to wear all the hats. So we really provide support around those pieces.
All the back end services that aren't the most creative parts. I think it is interesting what you mentioned about a formalization program. My family, I grew up in New York, but my family's roots, the history is in the South and in the church, right? And that was always a fundraiser, selling dinners, right? And so that whole premise that you talked about formalizing that into an actual legal, formal, on paper business model has been key. And starting in the mission where, of course, if you've been in the Bay or if you live in the Bay, the mission is like one of the biggest hotspots in the Bay for amazing food. So I can just imagine all the things that were coming out of there that maybe were not on, an above board business level, but still all the while producing top-notch product.
Totally. And I think that that's the thing that I really just believe, right? Like the talent is everywhere. Like there are so many people who are so entrepreneurial, who are so talented, and they absolutely can and should be business owners, just like, people who have access to college education, to loans, to, so many of the other things that make it easier to start a business. And it's so often women of color, people of color generally, immigrants that don't get that access, but the talent is there and the ability to create really incredible businesses that are really sustaining of that person in terms of generating an income and then also being able to create jobs for other people. That energy and that, that entrepreneurial spirit is really just, I guess, really what La Cocina is here to resource, and to provide those amazing, talented entrepreneurs, those incredible products that like absolutely deserve to be in the market with all the different pieces of the puzzle that it's just really hard to put together if you are lower income, if you don't have, sort of like as much access.
I read that there are now like global models that are based on La Cocina that have been adapted in places. I heard Ukraine and London. London is a city I really loved and enjoyed. I found the food scene there to be so like markedly diverse. But there's this really interesting juxtaposition between the Bay being this area that's so well known for industry and diversity, specifically around food, and the fact that that doesn't always necessarily translate to business and ownership. So why do you think the structure of a program like La Cocina became a necessary thing in a place like the Bay that has so much global representation? Like you almost would think this would have been happening more organically.
Yeah, I mean, income inequality, just like the way that systems are set up here, racism, gender inequality. Even though you're right, we are such a hot spot for entrepreneurship. We're such a hot spot for venture capital, for innovation. Yeah. But, those things go disproportionately to people who aren't from communities of color, and to people who maybe already have a proven track record, who aren't, just cooking from their homes. And so I think that really it's about highlighting that if you do resource folks, and if you really believe that these products and these restaurant concepts, are the best, like you said, right? Like absolutely deserving of all of their James Beard Awards and all of their, Eater Best Restaurant Awards. You've got to really like resource them. You've got to really provide them with access to kitchen, to capital, to sales, like all those different pieces. And that's just not distributed evenly.
Yeah.
And I think especially so in a place where there's, just a really big gap in terms of like our racial wealth gap in the Bay Area.
Yeah. And a technological gap, right?
For sure.
This is the home of tech, but, lots of businesses, whether they're operating, as a formal business or not, many of them are just like cash only because the cost or the learning curve of kind of navigating Square and Venmo and, the POS and all these things can just be sometimes a little bit overwhelming.
Totally. And it's actually also interesting. I mean, I've now been at La Cocina for so long. Like when we were first getting started, like these tools didn't exist. A lot of them are new, right? Like, and so I think that for cooks, people who really feel comfortable in the kitchen with knives and chopping things and, like the thought of having to sit in front of a computer all day is really kind of like the opposite of why they got into this in the first place. But these tools and these, different technologies have become so ubiquitous in terms of what small business owners need to understand that it really is a big part of, I think, why it's important for organizations like La Cocina to exist, to be able to like bridge that. We have learning circles, we have workshops, we have amazing volunteers, we have people who have worked it into it, who sit with people to be like, this is how QuickBooks works. Like we're lucky to be in the Bay Area and to have this incredible ecosystem of people who I think really do care about the food industry, who really want to eat well, who really love, discovering like the next best delicious restaurant. And so that realization that like, maybe they have skills that they can also support small businesses with in addition to being their customers. And that some of that is like the tech ecosystem that we have here too. Because you're right, it is super complicated.
It is. And, counter to the creativity, like you said, that sometimes has people in the kitchen. Yeah. So we're sitting here in, I mentioned in the intro that we're in the Tenderloin. So we're sitting here in what has been known as the municipal marketplace for La Cocina. It's a huge space. It's so beautifully and culturally and eclectically decorated. I've been here. This is my third time here. So amazing. The first time I was here, there was a cohort that had just recently ended and there was a community dinner.
Nice.
And I was sitting like almost in the same spot where I am right now. It just, the table was full of people and you just kind of sat somewhere and met people and had delicious food. And I always remember there was things with Japanese representation and Latin representation and soul food representation, and it was such a mashup. You would think sometimes, a meal needs to be cohesive, but even with all those different cultural representations, it felt cohesive to me.
Nice.
And then my next time I came here, I came with a friend who works in the culinary industry who was friends with Chef Nafi of Teranga. And we had a spread. She prepared like a whole spread of all these things. And it was like my next time here having another amazing meal. But we do know that there's been some changes to how and where La Cocina operates, specifically around the municipal marketplace. And this to me was a prime example of businesses and organizations having to shift due to the changing dynamics in the city of San Francisco. So can you talk about the role that the municipal marketplace will continue to play in La Cocina's landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spoke about our founding and our roots in the Mission District and the kitchen that we have there. And then we, in like the 2010s, really found that a lot of our businesses were actually graduating into spaces outside of San Francisco. So our first restaurant graduate was actually up in Marin. Then we had people who were graduating in, to the Fruitvale in Oakland, Berkeley, even Hayward. But actually finding locations in San Francisco was really challenging, in part because there was the tech boom and real estate got really expensive and it just was a really tight market. And we really felt like, gosh, if we had access to real estate that we could then, provide for our entrepreneurs at a below market rate, that would be really powerful. It would be really powerful in terms of being able to prove that these are the best entrepreneurs and that their food is incredible. And, how do we do that? And the idea behind the marketplace was really around like access to real estate. And so this space, this very enormous space, you're right, used to be a post office. And
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a post office. And then it's going to be housing. It's going to be affordable housing.
Oh, wow.
And so in the in-between, right, while they raise all the money and get everything organized to build the housing, the city was looking for something to activate it. Because just having an abandoned post office in the middle of a neighborhood doesn't help anyone, right? Like it just was sitting here doing nothing. And so the city RFP'd the space, La Cocina applied to that. And we had the vision of, being able to create this space for, exactly what you said, right? To have our food businesses here and have people come in, have meals. And we had the misfortune of being ready to open in 2020. We held off and we opened in 2021. I know, just the timing. And honestly, I'm so proud, like we opened in 2021 in like the midst of all the waves and the Omicron and it's open. Nope, it's closed again. And now you can
take it off.
Totally.
Yeah.
Indoor dining, outdoor dining, like it just was really, really tough and really crazy. And also, like, everyone was working from home for the most part. And all the offices around here, I mean, when we were doing the feasibility study for this space, there were like tens of thousands of workers, right? Like the federal building and all the city buildings, and then a lot of these tech companies. And then there was almost nobody. Yeah. And so we had amazing people come here for lunch. It was like such a amazing gathering space in terms of just like the kind of mix of people who were able to come here and get lunch, but it just was never enough people in terms of our sales. And then also just the cost to operate, like all businesses. I mean, you're hearing this in lots of different articles and lots of people talking about how it's pretty tight, like we want to pay people well, so labor is expensive. We want to eat well and have our farmers do well, so food is expensive. Like there's all these different reasons why, but like all of our costs are going up and the sales just weren't there. And so we had to make the really tough decision to close the space to the public, because that's really what was most expensive about this space, was being able to make, open all of our doors and welcome people in, just in terms of staffing. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, it really was like a really tough decision in terms of being able to, talk to all the businesses, talk to them about how, I mean, this is the other thing though, like the world around us changed so much. There are so many vacancies. Yeah. Like, whereas before it was so hard to get a restaurant space in San Francisco, like now there's so many opportunities. And so I feel actually really grateful in some ways, because all of the businesses that were selling here are now selling somewhere else, right? So Kahja had their booth here. Now they're at Salu Hall. You mentioned Nafi from Taranga. She participated in the Vacant to Vibrant program on Embarcadero, like right across in the ferry building. You like look out at the water. I mean, these are spaces that would have been really hard to access pre-pandemic. And so, Bouge Cali is going to be moving to the ferry building. Estrella Snacks from here is going to open a restaurant on Ellis Street really soon. I mean, there's a lot of movement in terms of people being able to find different opportunities. And what we're able...
Bell's just opened a full-scale restaurant.
Yes, she did.
Yes. In the
right on Fillmore.
Yes.
And so I really feel like there's just... the world changed. And so, we decided that we had to change too, and so we really didn't want to have to just close it up again. And have it just be like a boarded up, empty old space until it becomes housing. And so what we decided to do was to make it into a second incubator kitchen. So in the same way that we have La Cocina on Folsom Street, we now have La Cocina on Hyde Street.
Okay, they have options.
We got a new name. And we, all of this amazing kitchen equipment, all of these beautiful spaces, they're still getting used, so we have all of our new businesses that are coming into the program, and this is going to be the kitchen space where they're going to be growing and doing their production and getting their empanadas made and, finding then their farmers markets and their catering and all of the different ways that food businesses start to sell that we've always had to do from our Folsom kitchen, because that doesn't have like a restaurant space, right? There's no public space. There's no public front, like for people to sell food.
Mm-hmm.
So people sell food elsewhere. So same situation here. People are cooking here and then they're selling their food elsewhere. They're selling at farmers markets. They're selling from food trucks. And we're able to serve a lot more businesses with the space. So
Okay.
13 businesses have their permits now. Well, some are almost there in terms of being able to cook from this kitchen. And what's cool is that we can still do events. So that cohort
Nice.
dinner that you came to,
Mm-hmm.
we will be hosting another one.
Uh-oh.
I hope you come. And we also make the space available to nonprofits to rent it for their events. We have nonprofit rates. And so, you know, really trying to make lemonade out of the lemons that we got
Yeah.
in terms of our timing, and still be able to have this be a space that's utilized, you know, make sure that we're taking full advantage of all of the, you know, the capital that we put in, all of the donations that we got to make this amazing place, and to make sure that it's still serving small businesses and that it's still, you know, serving the food industry, and that it's still an opportunity for us to really focus on the core of the work that we do, which is business formalization.
Yeah.
And that then people go and sell where the people are, where the sales are.
Yep.
So that's what it is now. Now
Okay.
it's La Cocina on Hyde. Here you are.
Still cranking out good food, just in a very different way.
In a different way. Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, we talked a lot about the business, but let's pivot to talk about the experience. So, what happens once someone is accepted into the La Cocina Incubator program, and what are some of the processes they go through? Because there can be quite a gap between an incubator program and then operating a full-fledged business.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that a lot of people don't know about La Cocina's program is that it's really long.
Oh, how long is it?
On average, 6 years.
Wow. Oh, no, I
Actually,
had no clue.
Maybe not on average 6 years, like maybe on average 5.5 years. But yeah, it's like a 6-year program, basically.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that it takes a long time. It takes a long time to bridge that gap from like, what is it like to cook at home and make, you know, cakes for your friends, to get all your permits, licenses. You know, we do that in what we call pre-incubation. So, well, let me back up. People apply, right? So we have an application process. We taste people's food. We see whether or not it's the right moment, kind of in terms of our capacity, their capacity, et cetera, to get started in the program. And if people qualify and they're, you know, the product is delicious and their business is viable, then they start in what we call pre-incubation. So pre-incubation is like 6 to 8 months, and that's really like the foundations. So really all of the foundations required to start a formal business, which include branding, professional food photography, you know, getting a website up and running. If you, maybe you already have a business name, but maybe you don't yet. Maybe, you know, you're still just whatever, going by your first name. Although actually a lot of people end up picking their name as their business name. But, you know,
Get your
all
domain
of those,
name, all
totally,
those things together.
get all that together. Also figuring out how to work in a commercial kitchen, like different to make like one cake at a time in your little home oven, to
all
then
ovens are not the same.
all of a sudden getting a deck oven and being able to do all, you know, like
Yes.
there's just that whole process of figuring out how your recipes work, making sure that they are the same every time, because that's like another part of being a business owner with the food industry that's important. Permits, licenses, that QuickBooks that I was talking about, all of the accounting, like how are you going to pay your taxes, like all of those pieces. So 6 to 8 months, we have a curriculum. People go through it in a cohort. So they have a supportive group of people who they're going through it together.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's really awesome to be in those cohort dinners and to watch people kind of going through the program, because they're also so excited for each other, and they're, you know, they like champion each other's products, and they often show up for each other's events, and it's really cool. So that's pre-incubation. And then we have benchmarks. I mean, I'm getting detailed here, but you know, so people are working towards specific goals during that time. And once they've met at least 80 of them, 80% of them, they are able to transition to incubation. So, you know, they've got their permits, they've got their logo, they've got their business cards, they've got all the pieces of the puzzle in terms of what their business needs to be formal. They're ready to sell. So then they transition to incubation, and incubation is this kind of, we're actually at this point trying to really create some sort of a more like time boundaries on the program, because the pandemic really stretched out how long people were in the program, and we want to make sure that we're really encouraging growth and encouraging people to move through the program. So, you know, 1 to 3 years is like kind of where we're at in terms of like the amount of time that people really are building. So getting their farmers markets, getting their catering, growing, accessing more sales, doing pop-ups, all of the different ways that people kind of gather enough clientele, customers, support for their business.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain point, they shift from just kind of that growth incubation mode into like, oh, okay, they're like stable. And right when that happens, we're like, okay, great. Now how are you going to get out of here? We love all the businesses at La Cocina, but this is an incubator program. We know we need people to exit.
Yeah.
And so then we kind of have this like exit phase, which is really about, okay, what is this next thing going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going to cook? Do you want a restaurant? Do you want a
Want a
cafe?
food truck?
Do you want a food truck?
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And so then it's a lot of real estate, like going around, checking out neighborhoods, counting people, and really thinking about like, what is this business going to look like once I'm out of this kind of shared use kitchen phase?
Yeah.
And it looks different for everybody. Some people want full restaurants. Some people want kiosks in farmers market or in like food halls. Some people want to keep being farmers market businesses and, then find a different commercial kitchen they can cook from. So we really, our program's pretty tailored in terms, people start off as a cohort, but we're really working with people and what's their vision for what they want their business to be. And then really resourcing that vision through our own staff, through the volunteers that we work with, through partnerships with other nonprofits in the Bay Area that also provide business support. Mm-hmm. So I was actually at Ferne's opening and we were just talking about how like it takes a village, because it really does, in terms of like all the different supports that people get. And
it's a
then,
big undertaking.
Totally. And then people graduate. So usually, like I said, year 5 or 6, the goal is that people they're operating self-sufficiently. They're like making money and they don't need to be in our subsidized kitchen space anymore, and they can be in their own spaces. And we've got, like you mentioned, a lot of them at the beginning, like a lot of people who are doing that. And it's awesome when it happens every time. Yeah. And then the other thing that I think people also maybe don't realize is that even after those 6 years, like Ferne, for example, she graduated from, I'm pretty sure she started La Cocina in 2013. I can't really remember. But she graduated to the Emeryville Public Market. Did you ever have a fried chicken out there?
That is where I've had it.
Oh, yes. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was her graduation. She left our kitchen. She went to Emeryville and she was like doing her thing in Emeryville. And then she got the opportunity to open a restaurant in San Francisco, right? Because with the pandemic and just all the different recovery stuff that the city is doing, it was kind of like, come back to your home neighborhood. And so she was like, all right. And so that's, we're back. We're back to supporting Ferne. And like, she's a graduate of our program. Ferne was actually one of our board members before, but we still stay connected to all of our graduates. If they want to be connected, like we're here, we're here to answer questions. We're here to continue to be a resource. We're here to be a community. Yeah. And I think entrepreneurship can be lonely. You're just kind of doing your thing. You're wearing all the hats. It's a lot. And so I think to be able to do that with others and with others who are similar to you, like, other women, other moms, other people who, experience barriers. It's just nice to kind of have that support and to know that like we have each other's backs. So it's a long road. It's a long
process.
Totally. And it's about like building relationships. And so it's wonderful. Like Lunette is the same thing. That's actually when I graduated, she was first at the Emeryville Public Market. Then she had her restaurant in the Fruitvale on International. And now she's opening at the Ferry Building. And so, like we're still connected to her. She's not like in our program anymore, but still part of the community.
So now, as you say that, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 people that came through La Cocina, if I'm counting right, that will be in the Ferry Building, because Reams, California is there. Shout out to Reema Seal. And then that's going to be Shawnee Peaches Patties is there, and then Bouge Cali is going there, and now Lunette.
Yeah.
Lunette, did I say it right?
Lunette, yeah. Knight
Lunette
is the name of the owner.
Okay. Nice.
I know, and that doesn't even count all the people who are there at the farmers markets. Because, they have the Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday markets, and we've got tons of businesses. Like I was just walking by, and Beanie's out there at the Thursday market. Mi Comedor is out there at the Thursday market. We've got a bunch of businesses that participate in the Saturday market. So yeah, it's really cool.
I love it. What do you think is a common trait that some of your biggest success stories share?
Gosh, that's such a good question. They're just, oh man, such hard workers. Like being in the food industry is not easy, but it is like the most passionate people who are so willing to like give it their all. Like, that's what I really feel like they just all have in common. Like, they're just all incredibly, like, tough, and like will work those long hours, will set up the farmer's market, and like they are smiling
Yeah.
often, it's hard work, but I do feel like there's just there's this sense of, this is what I want to be doing, and I get to do this. I get to feed people. I get to, share my culture and like the things I care about through my food. And I do, like they all really, like, anybody who makes it in the food industry has that, like, that heart and just that like grit and, just like not afraid of hard work.
Yeah.
For sure.
A couple of episodes back, I interviewed Chef Hina Patel over at Besharam, and she talked about coming to the program and feeling like, at the age and stage she is of life, like, am I going to have it? It's a lot of standing on your feet, and, am I going to be able to do this? And just how much she was able to look to her left and right and see all of these women doing exactly what you said, and that being the realization for her that, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, and she's got it. I mean, she's there.
That food is amazing at Besharam.
Cooking,
Yes.
and like then she's doing guest chefing, and I mean, yeah, it's incredible. Like, just that that passion and like just that ethic, of like hard work is really, it's awesome to watch.
Yeah, really nice. We all know, of course, that this is an election year. And with there being a lot of threats to funding for equity-themed programs, front and center, how is La Cocina thinking about what a potential approach might be to what we could have to contend with for the next 4 years?
What a great and also scary question.
Scary. I know.
Fun fact, when I joined La Cocina, George Bush was president.
Okay.
So, I've been through a lot of political cycles and what that has meant for our community. And I think the thing that I focus on and what sort of makes me feel hopeful is the community that we have here in the Bay. And I think the real sense that like we have each other's back kind of no matter what's happening nationally. And I felt that when Trump got elected, and sort of like how everybody kind of came together and thought, no, this really means we have to double down our support, and we have to really, put our money where our values are, right? And really, take care of the things that really matter a lot to us. And so I think that hopefully we'll be in a different place come this November. But I do really feel like there is a sense of, I think the Bay is a really special place, and San Francisco is a really special city. And, I think that there's a lot of support for businesses, for small businesses, and for businesses owned by women, people of color. And, I think that we want to keep proving that it's possible here, and making sure that we're like the example of like how it should be.
Okay. Fingers crossed. We'll get through this year and the next 4, but fingers crossed that, we don't have a return to days of old.
Yeah.
So much of food is experience, right? And for people coming from immigrant communities, many times that includes an experience of like being in places where you don't see the foods and the preparations that you're familiar with reflected anywhere around you. So even beyond the business part, talk about the importance of creating a sense of like what I'll call cultural food familiarity within diverse communities.
I love that question. And it's actually one of my favorite things about San Francisco and about being in the Bay Area is that I think that one of the easiest ways to connect with someone who's very different from you is to try the food from where they come from and, their background. And I think that there's something just so magical about sitting down to a meal with people who maybe speak a different language than you do, or have a different religious background, or whose ancestors came from a different place, and to be able to find some commonality, right? Like, it's so human to eat and to share food, and it's essential. And I think that part of what for me at least, and certainly for so much of our community, what made the pandemic so hard was like losing that ability to gather and to connect and to share meals and to share food and to, have that kind of exchange. And I I think it's so exciting when someone tries something for the first time that's like a flavor they've never tried before or an ingredient they've never had before, and just to watch what that does. I mean, it doesn't always mean they like it, but just, it expands your horizons. And I think that even though it's kind of rooted in food, it has like a ripple effect, right? In terms of your openness to connect with someone who has a different belief system or who has a different background or who looks different. And so I think it's essential. And I think part of what makes me excited about La Cocina's consulting work, which you talked about, sort of like what this model can do in other places, is like immigrants shape where they go no matter where that is, right? And all of our different diasporas have really shaped the places where we land. My family's from Mexico, and there's Mexican food all over the U.S. because there's Mexicans all over the U.S. And I think that there's just a real opportunity for that kind of cultural exchange and understanding through food that's really unique. And so hopefully more and more people seeing the value of foods made by people of color, foods, that immigrant communities bring to their community, will, I don't know, in my most optimistic, help bridge some of those differences and some of that fear that people feel around things being different, things changing.
Because food is so symbolic of home, right? And you come to a new place. I remember moving, I went from New York to Atlanta to the Bay Area. But, New York and Atlanta on the East Coast. And I remember moving out here and just like certain grocery store items not being able to find. So you're cooking things and it's not coming out quite the same because you don't have your special smoked sausage or whatever the case may be. And so I can just imagine how much that's magnified when you're here from a whole other country and there's whole things that just don't exist here. And it's your job to build them and bring that here, though.
Totally. And you're right. There is that sense of like frustration, but then there's this creativity. Like speaking of Hina, and the food at Beshram, but the food anywhere, the food at Lunette, the food at, all of the different La Cocina grads, Reams, like it's this ability to take what you grow up with or what your mom's recipes were or your grandma's recipes were and then root them in this new place and in these new ingredients and in what you have here in the Bay Area and with California and everything that we have here in terms of our food.
We're so spoiled.
We are so spoiled. But it's this kind of magical thing that happens, right? When that comes together.
Yeah. I love it. For anyone listening who might be interested in potentially applying to be part of a cohort, what would you tell them are really important points to consider?
Do you really want to do this?
Once you get in, you're in.
Honestly, the first thing I say to people is, have you worked at a formal food business? Because I think that it's really helpful for people to get a sense of it. So if you think you want a food truck, cook, like do your thing and go work on a food truck and see what it's actually like. Or you think you want to own a restaurant, work in a restaurant and try to work in as many different positions at that restaurant as you can, because it will really be eye-opening in terms of then what it means to run the business. So that's like my first piece of advice. If you want a bakery, go work at a bakery, like just really get a sense of what it means. And then to also really think about like, is what you love the cooking part or is what you want to do the business ownership part? Because the cooking actually often goes away. Like you hire cooks and you have to then be running the business. Yeah. And so I think that that's like another thing that sometimes doesn't occur to people, but it is really important to consider. And actually we have like Hina still does a lot of the cooking at Beshram. And so you can still be touching the food. Like you can still be really involved, but you also have got to do the taxes and the books and the
build systems.
Totally. Yeah. So it's not like it has to go away, but I do just think that like owning a business is about the business. So working in a business, like the kind of business that you want to run, and then really having a sense of that, like, I think you said like the back of the house, like that part, right? Like that's really, really important. And those are the things that I just think it's important for people to think about.
Yeah. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Besides the food, what are some ways the community can help support?
I mean, the food's the best part. Just eat.
It is the best part.
But La Cocina is a nonprofit, and we need donations to keep doing this work and to keep supporting these incredible businesses and to be able to let new businesses in. So donating is one thing. And then I think also volunteering. We have a volunteer form on our website, and we're actually going to be doing more events. In 2025 is La Cocina's 20th anniversary.
Uh-oh.
I know. So it's next year, which is a really exciting, kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And we clearly, right, with the pandemic, we haven't done our big events, and it just helps to have additional hands. So, volunteering and donating. And then also, I think, like evangelizing, like talk up the restaurants that you love. This is something I heard a long time ago, but like when someone has a bad experience, they're pretty likely to leave a negative review.
Yes, they are.
But if they have a good experience, like, okay, they just like walk out and then, but tell 10 people, tell 20 people.
Absolutely.
And like that, just being able to actually talk about the places you love and giving them love on social media and making sure that you show up for the small businesses that you care about and that you tell other people about them is also really, really impactful. You can only have one lunch every day, but you can talk about all the amazing other places people should be eating.
Lunches some days.
That's true.
Depends on the day.
You're right. There's a limit to how many times you can eat per day. It's not only one, but you can still like show love for all those spaces, even if you can't make it to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I will make sure that I post all those opportunities, links to donate and to volunteer with the show notes. Tell people where they can go to find out more about La Cocina.
Visit our website, lacocinasf.org, and you can also follow us on social media. I would also say sign up for our newsletter. Like, we break all the best food stories in terms of who's opening and where and when. And you can do that at the very bottom of our website, lacocinasf.org. We have a newsletter, which is wonderful. We do social media. And yeah, those are kind of the ways that you can find out about what's going on in our world and all the amazing businesses that we get to support.
All right. Well, y'all heard it. I'll make sure to share all that information. If you want to keep up with me in between episodes, you can find me on Instagram at HeyKinTheBay. That has been this week's episode of the As Told By podcast. See you on the next one.
Thank you.